I was 22 when I first realized that I was in love with him. It wasn't the kind of love that happened in an instant, the kind where you look into someone's eyes and instantly know. It wasn't the love that people write about in novels or sing about in songs. It was quiet, slow, and subtle, creeping into my heart when I wasn't paying attention. His name was Ben. He was everything I thought I didn't need in my life. Older, different from my usual type, and the one person I thought could never see me the way I saw him. But as life often does, it throws you into situations where nothing makes sense, and yet everything feels right. Ben and I met during my sophomore year at university. We were in the same political science class, a required course for our major. He was a year ahead of me, and I didn't think much of him at first. He wasn't loud or charismatic like most of the people I was drawn to. He had a quiet confidence about him, a stillness that made him seem older, wiser. He was also the type of person who always seemed to be in the background, never asking for attention. But when he spoke, people listened. I remember the first time we really spoke. I was struggling with an essay on political theory and, like most college students, I left everything until the last minute. I was sitting at a cafe near campus, surrounded by my textbooks, frantically trying to piece together my thoughts when Ben sat down across from me. He had a notebook in hand and was quietly sipping his coffee, working on his own assignment. After a few minutes, he glanced over at me and noticed the frustrated expression on my face. "You're struggling with that essay, aren't you?" he asked casually, not in a way that was intrusive, but in a way that made me feel seen. I sighed, glancing at him. "How did you know? You look like you're about to pull your hair out," he said, offering me a small smile. I couldn't help but laugh, despite my frustration. "Yeah, it's not my best moment," I admitted. "I don't know where to start." "Well, I'm not an expert, but I'd be happy to help if you want. I know that theory pretty well." I was surprised. We had barely spoken before, but there was something so genuine about the way he offered his help, as if he wasn't just trying to be nice, but actually meant it. "Really?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You'd help me?" "Of course," he said with a shrug. "I've been there too." For the next hour, Ben patiently walked me through the essay, explaining concepts in a way that made them feel more manageable, more understandable. I was surprised by how easy it was to talk to him. His words were calm, and his way of explaining things wasn't condescending but supportive, as if he wanted me to succeed. He didn't expect anything in return. He didn't ask for anything. He just helped. It was the simplest act of kindness, and yet it meant more to me than I could explain. Over the following weeks, we found ourselves talking more often, first in class, then after, when we'd grab coffee or lunch together. I started looking forward to seeing him, enjoying our conversations, even if they were about trivial things. There was something about the way he listened, really listened, that made me feel like I mattered, like my thoughts and ideas were worth something. We would talk about politics, of course, but also music, books, our families, our futures. Slowly, I began to realize that he wasn't just a classmate. He was someone I admired deeply. But the more I admired him, the more I began to feel something else, something deeper. I started to realize that I was falling for him. But the thing was, Ben wasn't interested in me the way I wanted him to be. He had a girlfriend, a beautiful, confident girl who was everything I thought I could never be. She was smart, outgoing, and effortlessly charming. She was everything I wasn't, and I couldn't help but compare myself to her. But despite knowing he was taken, I couldn't seem to stop my feelings from growing. There was a pull I couldn't ignore, a connection I couldn't deny. Every time Ben smiled at me, every time our conversations lingered longer than they should have, I felt my heart race, my thoughts clouded with hope. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was just being silly, that it was just a fleeting crush. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew I was in love with him, and that knowledge made everything complicated. I wasn't sure what to do with my feelings. I couldn't confess them to him. I couldn't risk losing our friendship, and I certainly didn't want to be the girl who interfered with his relationship. But the more time I spent with him, the more I realized that I couldn't pretend like nothing was happening. My heart was a tangled mess of emotions, of desires that I couldn't act on, and fears that I couldn't shake. It was one evening, a few months into our friendship, that everything came to a head. We had just finished a late study session for our final exams, and it had started to rain outside. The campus was quiet, the streets mostly empty, and I was walking with Ben toward the bus stop. We were both tired, the exhaustion of the semester weighing on us, but there was a lightness in the air. The rain made everything feel intimate, like the world had shrunk to just the two of us. We were talking about our plans for the summer, about what we wanted to do after graduation. As we reached the bus stop, I realized I didn't want the night to end. I didn't want to say goodbye. "Ben," I said suddenly, my voice trembling slightly, "can I ask you something?" He turned to face me, his expression curious. "Sure, what's up?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. What do you think happens when two people really care about each other, but one of them is already in a relationship? Ben looked at me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he was trying to understand the question. "I guess it depends," he said finally. "Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But if both people are committed to their relationships, I think it's important to respect that. It's not easy, but it's about being honest and understanding boundaries." I nodded, though I felt like his words had just confirmed what I already knew deep down. I was falling in love with someone who would never be able to love me the same way. The reality of it hit me harder than I expected, and I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Ben must have noticed the change in my expression, because his tone softened. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. I smiled weakly, trying to hide the hurt. "Yeah, I'm fine. Sometimes I think about things, about what happens when feelings don't line up with reality." Ben didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and touched my arm gently. His fingers wove against my skin. "Lily, you're an amazing person. I'm lucky to have you as a friend. Don't ever doubt that." His words, though comforting, felt like a final blow. I wasn't just his friend. I was in love with him, and no amount of reassurance could change that. The bus arrived, and we both climbed aboard in silence, sitting next to each other, as the city passed by in a blur of lights and shadows. I wanted to say something, to confess the truth that had been eating away at me for months, but I couldn't. I couldn't ruin everything we had, not when the reality was that he would never feel the same way. As the bus rumbled toward my stop, I felt a deep sense of finality settle over me. I wasn't going to tell him how I felt. I wasn't going to make him choose between me and his girlfriend. I was going to let him go, let him have the life he deserved, even if it wasn't with me. "Take care of yourself, Lily," he said when I stood to get off the bus. "You deserve all the happiness in the world." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "You too, Ben. You really do." As the doors closed behind me, I stood on the sidewalk, watching the bus disappear into the night. It was over. The love I had for him would remain unspoken, locked away in my heart, and I would have to learn to move on. But as I walked away, I realized something important. Sometimes love isn't about being with someone. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go, when to respect the love someone else has, and when to let your feelings guide you to a place of peace. And while it hurt, I knew I would find my way forward. The days that followed that bus ride were a blur. I tried to keep busy, to fill my life with things that would keep my mind occupied. Finals were approaching, and my professors had somehow managed to pile up every assignment for the semester into that last week. I threw myself into my work, trying to drown out the nagging ache in my chest. But no matter how much I focused on the textbooks, no matter how many assignments I completed, the truth remained. I was in love with someone who would never be able to love me the same way. It wasn't that Ben was unkind or dismissive. On the contrary, he was as thoughtful and supportive as he had always been. He continued to be there for me as a friend, checking in on me during stressful times, offering advice when I needed it. But each time I saw him, I felt that familiar ache grow within me. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, watching something beautiful just out of reach, knowing that you couldn't get to it no matter how hard you tried. Every smile he gave me, every laugh we shared, made me fall deeper into a feeling I couldn't escape. And it wasn't just the silence between us that hurt. It was the knowing that he would always care for me, that he would always be there for me, but never in the way I wanted. I couldn't force him to change his feelings. I couldn't make him see me as more than just a friend. So I did what I thought was best. I kept my distance. The holidays came, and Ben invited me to a small gathering with some of his friends. I wanted to decline, to avoid the pain of watching him be happy with others, but I couldn't bring myself to. I had to see him, even if it hurt. The night of the party, I put on a dress that I hoped would make me feel confident, even if I didn't feel it inside. I wanted to look like I was okay, like I had it all together. But as I walked into the room, and as I spotted Ben across the room, my heart sank. There was Rachel standing beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. They were laughing, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the holiday lights. I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy, sharp and bitter. It wasn't that I didn't want him to be happy, but it was hard to see the person you loved with someone else. It felt like a reminder of everything I couldn't have, everything I had to let go of. "Lily!" Ben's voice broke through my thoughts, and I turned to find him walking toward me. His smile was wide and warm, and for a moment it made me forget everything else. "I'm so glad you could make it." I forced a smile, hoping he didn't notice the sadness in my eyes. "Of course, I wouldn't miss it." "Good, it wouldn't be the same without you here." He grinned, and I felt a flutter in my chest, even though I knew it wasn't meant the way I wanted it to be. He introduced me to a few of his friends, and we ended up talking for a while, slipping into comfortable conversation. But every so often, my gaze would wander back to Rachel, standing next to him, and I'd catch a glimpse of how they looked at each other. It was that same quiet affection, the kind that I had longed for, and it made my chest tighten. I knew I shouldn't be jealous. I knew I should be happy for them. But all I could feel was the weight of the unspoken words between Ben and me. Finally, as the night wore on, I found myself outside on the balcony, staring out at the city lights, trying to steady my emotions. I didn't expect anyone to join me, but then I heard the door open behind me. "Lily," it was Ben's voice, soft but tentative. I turned to face him, feeling my heart skip a beat. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just needed some air." He stepped outside and stood beside me, his hands stuffed into his pockets. "I get it. Sometimes it feels like the noise of everything gets too much." We both stood there in silence for a moment, just looking out at the lights below. There was a comfortable stillness between us, but I could feel the tension building, the unspoken words between us that neither of us could bring ourselves to say. "I don't know what to say anymore," Ben admitted finally, his voice barely audible over the noise of the party. "I've been thinking about it, about everything between us, and I feel like I'm not being fair to you." I swallowed hard, trying not to let the tears that had been threatening to fall escape. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He turned to face me, his eyes searching mine. "I know that I've been distant. I know that I've been keeping things from you, but I don't want to hurt you, Lily. I care about you too much." "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "I know you care, but that's not the same as loving me." Ben looked away for a moment, and I could tell how hard this conversation was for him. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I just felt exhausted. I had known for so long that this moment would come. The moment where we both had to confront the truth that no matter how much we cared for each other, it would never be the love I had hoped for. "I wish it could be different," he said softly. "I wish I could feel what you feel, but I don't. I can't pretend that I do, and I can't keep leading you on." I nodded, feeling the last remnants of hope drain away. It wasn't a surprise. I had known this would come, but hearing him say it out loud made it real. I had spent so much time hoping for something that wasn't meant to be, and now I was left with the reality of it. "It's okay," I whispered, more to myself than to him. I need to let go." He stepped closer, his face full of regret. "Willie, please don't say that. I value you more than you know. You've been such an important part of my life, and I don't want to lose you." "You won't lose me," I said, my heart aching. "But I can't keep pretending either. I have to let go, for both of us." Ben reached out as if to touch me, but then hesitated, as if unsure of what to do. I gave him a small smile, even though it felt like a lie. "I think it's time we both move on," I said softly. "Maybe not now, maybe not right away, but eventually, we'll both move forward." I turned and walked back toward the door, my chest heavy, but my mind clear. Ben didn't follow me. He didn't call out. I didn't need him to. We had said everything that needed to be said. The night ended, and I left the party earlier than I planned. I walked back to my apartment alone, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel empty. I didn't feel broken. I felt like I was taking a step towards something new, something I had been avoiding for far too long. The next few months were tough. I stayed busy with school, with friends, with trying to heal. There were moments when I thought about Ben, about how things could have been, about the love I had lost. But every time I thought of him, I reminded myself that this was the right choice. This was the path I had to take. In the end, I learned that sometimes the hardest part of love is knowing when to let go. Not all love stories are meant to have happy endings. Sometimes they are meant to teach us the most important lessons about ourselves, about life, and about how to move on. And as I moved forward, I found peace in that. Peace in the understanding that love, though beautiful, isn't always forever. But the memories, the lessons, the growth, those stay with us, shaping who we become. The weeks after that night with Ben were hard. In a way I hadn't anticipated. I had expected to feel a sense of relief. After all, I'd come to terms with the fact that Ben and I would never be more than what we were. But instead, I felt a deep emptiness, as if a part of me had been torn away. I kept telling myself that I was doing the right thing, that letting go of him was the only way I could heal, but the ache in my chest wouldn't go away. I spent my days studying, keeping myself busy with everything I could. Finals were approaching, and I threw myself into my work like I had a purpose again. The days blended together, filled with early mornings in the library, late nights at the coffee shop, and moments of quiet solitude when I could escape the noise of the world. I avoided thinking about Ben too much, but there were times when I was alone, when his face would flash across my mind, and the emptiness would rush back. But I did my best to push it all aside. I had made a decision, and it was time to stick to it. The healing process wasn't going to be easy, and I knew I had to go through it, step by step. I stopped going to the places where I knew I'd see him. I couldn't face him. Not yet. I needed space. And so I began filling my life with other things. New hobbies, new friends, new activities. I threw myself into things that brought me peace, even if they didn't feel like they filled the void he had left. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life, without him in it. One evening, just before the semester ended, I found myself walking down the street toward the campus bookstore. I had decided to treat myself to a new book, something to distract me for the summer. As I crossed the street, I saw a familiar face ahead. My heart skipped a beat before I could stop it. Ben was standing on the corner, talking to a group of friends. I froze for a moment, unsure of whether to keep walking or turn around. But it was too late. He caught sight of me, and his face broke into a warm, familiar smile. "Lily," he called, walking over. "Hey, I didn't expect to see you here." I swallowed, trying to steady myself, and gave him a weak smile. "Hi, Ben. I didn't know you were still around. I thought you'd be done with exams by now." He shrugged, clearly not noticing my tension. "I'm sticking around for a while. Got a couple of things to finish up. What about you?" I glanced down at the book in my hands, trying to collect my thoughts. "Just finishing up some stuff, too. I needed a break from studying." There was an awkward silence between us then, the weight of everything we had said to each other still hanging in the air. I didn't know if we could just slip back into the comfortable rhythm we had before the conversation we had that night, before the words were spoken. I didn't know what to say. "I've been meaning to check in on you," Ben said, his voice quieter now. "I know things were complicated, but I hope you're doing okay." I forced myself to look in the eye, trying to keep the sadness from showing. "I'm doing better," I said, and it wasn't a lie. "It's been hard, but I'm moving forward." Ben seemed to pause, as if he were searching for the right words. "I don't want to make things weird, but I just want you to know that I care about you, Lily. I really do. You've been a good friend to me. I've always appreciated that." I nodded, my throat tightening. "I know, and I appreciate you too, Ben. You've been a good friend to me as well." There was another long pause. I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell him that I had loved him, that it had hurt to let go. But I didn't. I had already said everything I needed to say, and nothing more could come from reopening old wounds. "I should probably get going," I said finally, glancing at my watch. "I have a lot of work to do." Ben nodded, looking as if he wanted to say something else. But instead, he just smiled that familiar smile of his. "All right. Take care of yourself, Lily. You're stronger than you think." I smiled back, though it was bittersweet. "Thanks, Ben. You too." And with that, I walked away. As I continued down the street, I could feel the weight of the conversation lingering in my chest. It wasn't a big moment. It wasn't some grand declaration of love or closure. But somehow, it was enough. Ben had said what he needed to say, and I had said what I needed to say. We had both acknowledged the reality of our situation, that we cared about each other, but we couldn't be what we both wanted. And in that, I found a sense of peace. Over the next few weeks, I kept my distance. I didn't want to run into him again. Not because I hated him or because I was still in love with him, but because I needed to heal. I couldn't keep pretending that we could be just friends, while my heart was still holding on. But as time went on, I started to feel stronger. The emptiness didn't sting as badly as it had before. I found new passions, new directions for my life. I spent time with friends who lifted me up. Friends who understood the pain of love lost, but never judged me for it. I started doing things for myself, things that weren't about Ben or anyone else. I learned to enjoy my own company again. One day, about a month after that encounter with Ben, I found myself sitting at a park bench, looking at the city skyline and reflecting on everything that had happened. I had come to realize something important, something that had taken me months to fully understand. Letting go didn't mean giving up on love. It meant accepting that some people are meant to be in our lives for a season, and that season can be beautiful, even if it's short. It meant realizing that love, in all its forms, has a way of shaping us, even when it doesn't look the way we expect it to. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few months lift off my shoulders. I had loved Ben, and that love had taught me more than I could have imagined. It had taught me about vulnerability, about letting go, and about finding peace within myself. A few months later, as graduation day approached, I found myself looking forward to the future. I had learned to let go of what I couldn't control, to trust that love would find me in its own time and in its own way. And though Ben would always have a place in my heart, I knew that I was ready to move on, to embrace the next chapter of my life with an open heart. And as I walked across that stage, receiving my diploma, I realized that sometimes the greatest love story we can experience is the one we have with ourselves. The months after graduation passed in a blur. I moved to a new city for a job I was excited about, a new beginning that felt like a fresh start. The excitement of starting my career kept me busy, but there were still quiet moments when the past would creep back into my mind. Memories of Ben, the love I had quietly carried for so long, the moments of tenderness that I had held onto in the deepest corners of my heart. But each time I thought of him, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, as if I had truly let go. I had learned to embrace the lessons that love, even unrequited love, had taught me. I spent the next year building a new life. I grew into the woman I had always hoped to be, confident, independent, and secure in who I was. I made new friends, traveled to places I'd always wanted to visit, and began to cultivate a life that was entirely my own. Every day was a reminder that love wasn't just about being with someone else. It was about finding contentment within myself, about loving who I was without needing anyone else to validate me. And then, one evening, out of nowhere, I received a message. It was from Ben. "Hey, Lily, it's been a while. I've been thinking about you, and I just wanted to check in. How have you been?" The message wasn't long or particularly profound, but the moment I read it, I felt a rush of emotions I hadn't anticipated. I had moved on, but Ben's presence in my life had been so impactful that his words still stirred something deep inside me. I took a moment, letting the words settle before I replied. "Hey, Ben, it's been a long time. I'm doing well, settling into life here. It's been an exciting year, a lot of changes. How about you?" His response was quick, as if he had been waiting for me to reply. "I'm glad to hear that. Life's been good, but I've missed talking to you. I know it's probably not what you expected to hear, but I've thought about our conversations a lot. I've been thinking about everything." I felt my heart tighten. The uncertainty I had carried for so long, the questions I had buried in the back of my mind, suddenly resurfaced. What was he saying? Why was he reaching out now? "I've thought about you too," I typed back, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "You are an important part of my life, Ben. I don't regret anything that happened between us." There was a pause before he replied, and when his message came through, it was more vulnerable than I had expected. "I've been struggling with something," he wrote. "I don't know how to say this, but I need to be honest with you. I realize that I've never really told you the full truth about why I was distant after that night. The truth is, I was scared. Scared of what I was feeling, scared of what might happen if I allowed myself to be vulnerable. But most of all, I was scared that I was falling for you." I felt my heart stop. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. Ben, the one person who had always seemed out of reach, was telling me that he had felt the same way. But I couldn't ignore the years that had passed, the journey I had been on since that moment when I had walked away from him. "I know it's a lot to take in," he continued, "but I needed to say it. I never wanted to hurt you, and I never wanted to complicate things. I understand if you've moved on. I don't expect anything. But I didn't want you to think that I didn't care." His words hit me like a wave, crashing over everything I had worked so hard to build. For a long moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to run toward him, to leap into his arms and forget everything that had come before. But I couldn't. I had to remind myself of how far I had come, how much I had grown, and how much I had learned to love myself in the process. I took a deep breath, staring at the message on my phone, and then I typed my response. Ben, I appreciate you being honest with me. It's funny, but I think we both needed time. Time to figure out who we are and time to grow. I've spent a lot of time thinking about us too, and I've realized that while I will always care about you, I can't go back to what we were. I've found peace with where I am now, and I know that moving forward is the right choice for me. There was no reply for a while, and I sat there, my heart beating in my chest, unsure of what he was thinking. I had been honest with him, and I knew that was all I could do. I had chosen to let go of a love that wasn't meant to be, but in doing so, I had found something so much more valuable. A life where I was in control, a life where I could be myself without needing someone else to define me. Finally, his reply came, simple and sincere. I understand, Lily, and I respect that. I've learned so much from you. You've taught me what it means to truly care about someone without expectations, without pressure. And for that, I'll always be grateful. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. You're one of the strongest people I know. I sat back, my heart swelling with a bittersweet sense of closure. We had come full circle. The love I had once hoped for, the love I had quietly carried in my heart, was now a part of my past. And with that, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I had done the hard work. I had let go of what wasn't meant for me, and in doing so, I had created space for something even greater, for my own growth, my own happiness, and my own future. As I put my phone down and looked out the window at the city below, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the burden of what-ifs and unspoken words. Free from the ache of unrequited love. Free to embrace the future that awaited me. The next chapter of my life was just beginning, and I was ready for it. I didn't need Ben to complete me. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was enough, just as I was. And as I walked forward into my future, I knew that love, real love, would find me when the time was right. But for now, I was content with the love I had for myself. And that, in itself, was everything.